Ed Stetzer Live, and I am Ed Stetzer coming to you live, but I must confess to you, we're having a bit of technological problems, so if I don't sound with my normal svelte voice, it is because I'm going through my phone, which is unusual, but necessary at this moment, because there's some technological issues. I should say that it's not a technological issue with the amazing team at Moody Radio, but for some reason, my computer and my sound system, we got a little home studio, is not connecting as it should. But I did not want to avoid or miss the opportunity to have my guest on today. So we're going to do this a little old school, but I hope you'll be able to hear okay, and we'll be able to walk through that together. So again, my name is Ed Stetzer. I am your host this and every Saturday, and today we're going to have our guest talk about aging, which is a pertinent issue in my life lately. I guess in all of our lives, we all inevitably do age. But I should introduce myself first. I'm the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University, and as will be a recurring theme in this show, I'm unfortunately making a little bit about myself. I am in my late 50s. And when I say late 50s, I'm in my latest 50s. Like, I am 3 weeks away from being 60, so it's latest 50s. And I recently, those of you who follow the show, had a pretty major health crisis, 10-day hospitalization, surgery, still on a walker. And I am spending a lot of time with people on walkers. You know, I don't know, you just notice people. And I am younger than the vast majority of them on a walker, but it has just made me think about aging lately. And I was yesterday with my physical therapist, and I said I was getting old is tough. And he said, we don't talk about getting old, we talk about aging. And then my friend, Jen Wilkins, our guest, but she's a friend. She just spoke out here at Biola University at our Talbot School of Theology annual conference, did an amazing job. And she has a new book out, which I didn't see coming. Like, Jen, I'm going to have you explain this just in a minute, because this is not your normal lane. But the title of the book is Dust to Dust, a subtle beginning of a title, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. Jen is a Bible teacher from Dallas, Texas, an advocate for Bible literacy. That's what we had her come speak on at our Anchored conference. Did an amazing job. I would commend her to you. But she has organized and led studies for women in the home, church, and parachurch context, authored multiple Bible studies books, which is the lane we know you in, Jen Wilkin, but including her bestseller, Women of the Word. Jen Wilkin, I'm sorry I'm on the phone to talk to you, but hopefully you hear me well, and welcome to Ed Stetzer Live.
Thank you so much for having me on. And I'm cracking up because we are both on walkers right now.
I didn't know you were on a walker, so tell me about this.
Well, we've told our adult children, if you invite us on your vacations, they will get better. And so they did. And we went to Austria, and I slipped while I was there. It could have happened anywhere, but Austria is where it happened. Broke both bones in my left ankle and had surgery, and then had to get home. And I'm on a walker with you, buddy.
That is the wildest thing. And I will tell you, nothing makes you think of aging more. I was out, I'm doing, I guess physical therapy, but it's, I'm supposed to walk by myself 3 times a day. Well, Donna goes with me, and I've been doing that. So I'm just kind of cruising down the road. And it's like, I've noticed that people on motorcycles and people who drive Jeeps all sort of nod at each other when they drive past each other. Uh-huh. It's a whole walker thing. Like, I don't know, you haven't been in Southern California, but I'm cruising down, we try to go out on a nice sidewalk by the beach. And like, people nod at you when you got a walker, and I'm like, "What's up, bro?"
Well, I have laughed so hard. Oh, I thought, if I had known when I was writing this book that when it came out, I would be using a walker, I wouldn't have believed it. But it really does put you in the frame of mind to talk about aging.
It totally does. Totally. How long are you on the walker? Do you know?
Well, I just actually got off of the knee scooter, so I feel like I've got upgraded. But I have about 6 more weeks total.
6 more weeks. Okay. Yeah. I'm shooting for, my birthday is September 2nd, which, by the way, I kind of started the program by saying I'm turning 60 in a few weeks. And I wouldn't normally tell everybody that, but whoever put my Wikipedia, you don't really know who does your Wikipedia article. They put my birthday on there. So it's not a secret that I'm turning 60, but my goal is to be off the walker and on a cane. And according to the doctor, I might be on the cane for a year or so, which I think is cooler, though. I mean, I'm not saying that the walker's bad. I'm just saying that a cane Again, old people would get this reference. Little Fred Astaire dancing with a cane.
Oh, no.
Okay, so tell me, I know you. People don't know you. You're.
Mhm.
How do you start a conversation with a woman who wrote a book on aging? You're not that old. So
I'm
what
57.
kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't know if you were revealing ages.
Yeah.
So you're not that old. So why write a book on aging? I think it was fascinating. Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, and people who do know what I've written before know that my lane is Bible literacy and then biblical theology. But I've also spent most of my ministry years. I'm almost at the 30-year mark on some form of public ministry, and most of it's been spent among women. And so, while this is not a book that is just for women, the issue of aging tends to be top of mind, and the way it's discussed is always fascinating to me in female circles. Aging is an issue whether you're male or female. Like I was thinking about how you have a lot of guests on your show, and maybe some topics relate to some people and others don't, but everyone who's listening to this program is 7 minutes older than they were when they started, and so this is relevant for everyone. And then I think combining just the experience I'd had in the women's space with the passing of my mom in 2022, she was the first person close to me. This will tell you what a charmed life I've had. She was the first person close to me that I had lost. And so I began to process some things that I hadn't, I thought I was kind of ahead of the game on things because my mother had MS and I had been caregiving younger than my peers. And so I thought, oh, I'm probably doing pretty well, anticipating this aging thing. And then after she passed, I just began to put together some thoughts that hadn't occurred to me before, because why would they? I hadn't had the context for them.
Yeah, I mean it's a whole thing. I lost my dad recently, and my stepdad recently, and my my wife's stepdad, and so I mean, death does make us think about mortality. But we're within 2 years of each other. Though again, I'm about to pass that big marker to 6-0. It is. We. I joke. Tom doesn't like it when I joke. I say, when we turn 60, we're only 10 years away from being 70. Now that seems to me, isn't that the strangest thing? Like I tell Donna, we're 11 years right now. We're both same age, 59. We're 11 years away from being 70. But it's kind of a reminder, I mean, again, from dust to dust is our reality. And, it's, a lot of people, maybe young people listening right now don't necessarily think in terms of that way. When you start getting close to 60, you start thinking, the next 20 years are going to be aging years. And part of that has to be lean. We have to sort of lean into that. Now, one of the things in the book, you contrast the world's story of aging, which we put kind of a category of their false story of aging, and the Bible's true story. And I want you to go through that, explain it. But it's also worth noting, I'm a missiologist by training. My PhD's in missions, cross-cultural things. Is that it is a Western, you might even say a uniquely American. Like, I teach over in the UK, and I've spoken in a lot of Western contexts. This aging is just you being put away. Once you pass your prime, and people actually tweet things, this person in their prime, not in their prime. So there's pretty terrible ways of doing that. But it's a uniquely American thing that aging is just a loss and bad. Where in some cultures, not in all Western cultures, but particularly in cultures in the Eastern context, the greatest thing you can be is older and wiser. So again, you don't have to. You're welcome to opine on sort of the cultural differences, but what's the biblical difference as well?
Well, I think that's the question we have to get to, is why is our culture's view of aging so utterly different than the view of aging that's given to us in the Bible? And you're exactly right. The Bible was written to a culture, an ancient Near Eastern culture, that intuitively understood interconnection. And, here we sit in the West in the full throes of radical individualism, of the autonomy of the self. And we view growing to adulthood, like when we think about what it means to be a successful adult, typically we think of that as I left my home of origin, and the further I moved from it, the more successful I have been. And then you combine that with a generation of parents, so your parents' generation, and I would argue probably the generation before that, who felt like the greatest failure that they could experience would be to become dependent again on their children in their old age. And so, my mom was just determined that she was not going to interrupt my adult life at all with any of her needs. And so she would say, I'm so sorry I'm such a burden to you. And I had a little mantra. I would say, you are a person to love, not a problem to solve. And she would, oh, Jennifer, she didn't want to hear me say that, but I said it over and over again. And, the reality was caring for her did involve solving some problems. It did. But my first foot forward was predicated on relationship, because when you think about beginning of life care, my mother provided infant care for me. And imagine if I had been able as an infant to say, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm interrupting your young adulthood. It would be unthinkable. She would have been like, this is exactly what I'm supposed to be doing at this moment in my life. But we don't think of elder care or even elder honor in the same way, because our culture's false story of aging says that aging is a journey into obsolescence. The elderly are like that iPhone that you had 4 or 5 years ago. It's not good for anything but a paperweight. And we see aging as all loss. You're giving back your independence, because independence is such a value for us culturally. And we believe, you can see on social media in particular, that we believe that wisdom is found among the young. Where do people go when they have a question about, their health or even about aging? Like all of the anti-aging messaging that's out there among the influencers. Well, the influencers are all like 18 to 24.
Right.
And they're talking about your biological age versus your chronological age. There's no greater compliment that someone can pay a woman than to say, oh gosh, you don't look your age at all. As though looking your age is some terrible thing to happen to you. And so the anti-aging messaging in our culture is everywhere. It affects both men and women. And it could not be more different than the Bible's true story of aging. And when you live in a false story, you're living in a dangerous way. Like imagine if my dad is red-green colorblind. Imagine if he didn't understand that his vision impaired the way that he perceived the world, and he was driving through stoplights as though his version was the right one.
Fascinating. Okay, we're going to continue our conversation with Jen Wilkin in just a second, and want to encourage you to stay with us. And we're going to also take your phone calls in just a few minutes. Hopefully, we're getting our technology figured out as well. Our phone number is 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. We'll continue with your calls and a conversation with Jen Wilkin about aging, and how we might respond as Christians. Okay, we're back. Ed Stetzer Live. Jen Wilkin is our guest. We're having a fascinating discussion about her new book, Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. And again, I love the subtitle, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World, because again, that's the world in which we live. Now, Jen, you're not in Southern California. Let me just tell you that everything you have said is multiplied by 10 in Southern California. Like I'm a teaching pastor at Mariners Church here in SoCal. Mm-hmm. And like when we talk about age, we do messages, we do every year, beginning of the year, we do a thing called On the Table. And we talk about issues that people wonder about. And I got to tell you, like people here are terrified of aging, and they will spend money the joke around here is that, everyone stops aging, at least by their appearance, at about 50. And that's because of surgical assistance. So it's a whole thing. But yeah. There's a sense like, Don and I were just talking about this, like we're as 60-year-olds who have not had work done. So, in some places you do stand out, and we're like, it's okay. These lines on these, crow's feet on, we earned those. These are my kids, and these are, the joys of times, and these are, the hard times all sort of mixed in together. But man, I think the overwhelming, pressure from the world, like people like, the world's pressuring us towards sin, and the world's pressuring us towards compromise. But people don't recognize
Well, I think most of us want to start the conversation. This is my experience, especially among women, with, so can I not dye my hair? Like it's where do I draw the line? And
Yeah.
before you can start doing any work around how this is going to practically play out, you have to do some theological work that most of us just haven't done. And that I think the church has been largely silent on. When I see Christians who look like they're bought into this or talk like they're bought into this, I think no one has told them a theology of aging, and no one has told them a theology of the body. Or if they have, it didn't land in the framework of aging for them. And so I think one of the first questions you have to ask is, why do we age? And most Christians say, oh, well, we age because of the fall. And they say, and therefore, since death is an enemy, then aging is an enemy too, and I should fight it with everything that I can. And I hear this constantly. And one of the things we have to remember is that we were actually created to age. Now, aging looks different after the fall than it would have before the fall. And I don't pretend to know every way that aging would have looked before the fall. But when you pay attention to the beginning lines of the Bible, the creation account is the beginning of time. So it's, you have, it was evening and it was morning the first day, evening and morning the second day, and so on and so forth. So we know that time is in motion with the creation account. And then when you think about God's command that the living creatures would be fruitful and multiply, excuse me, that seems to imply that there were going to be babies born who would then age to the point of being able to have more babies, and so on and so forth. But I think that pre-fall, our bodies and souls were on the same aging trajectory, which was just up and to the right. We were going to continue to mature in ways that were non-declining, so to speak. And then after the fall, what happens is our interior lives still have the possibility of aging up and to the right, of ever increasing depth and richness. But now we understand that our bodies are taking the shape of an arc. They're going to go upward toward maturity, peak maturity, and then downward. We even have an expression for this called "over the hill." So people know, they know intuitively that this is what happens. But what I see in our generation is no. I can find a way to make that upward and downward arc continue to go up and to the right. You even hear people now today talking about achieving immortality in the next 10 years. Now, what they mean by that is a good question. And anyone who has spent time with someone in extreme age knows that you should be careful for what you wish for, because the final years of life can be quite a trial of adversity for people. But we all think we don't just think we're going to cheat death, we think we're going to cheat aging as well. And so consequently, we're willing to devote a great deal of what the Bible describes as very precious time to something that is described in the scriptures as deceitful, fleeting, like grass, like a flower. And we're like, no, I think I can preserve this flower.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a thing. I mean, it's literally the focus of so many people. I know Eric was actually, my pastor at Marist Church was talking recently about the very famous guy who's sort of trying to live forever and recently was diagnosed with a serious disease. And I just, so saddened because, we're all going to face this moment. And how we get there is there's not a desperation towards, this is like I'm headed towards this void of darkness. I mean, again, at the end of this is eternity. It is immortality. But you are focusing, of course, here in this book on the kind of the time here. And the book is centered on Psalm 90:12, which I think is such a great place to center this entire conversation. So, again, Psalm 90:12 says, "So teach us to number our days so we may get a heart of wisdom." So tell us about the wisdom we gain as we age.
Well, I'm sure you can testify to this because I think that there is what the Bible is telling us in the many places that it speaks of wisdom, and particularly among the aging, is that there is a form of aging that can only be received by the passage of time. And in the case of the Christian, and through the work of the Holy Spirit to sanctify us. So, we talk about someone who has a lot of work experience. Well, what we mean is they've done the job a long time and they're not making the same stupid mistakes they were 20 years ago, right? And if you talk about someone, if you describe someone as having wisdom beyond his years, what are you recognizing? That there is a form of wisdom that's only achieved through living life. Some people get there faster than others if they happen to be more observant. But for most of us, there is some wisdom that will only come with aging. So you and I are in our 50s. We're kind of at that point where we're like, you know what? There's a lot of stuff I don't care about anymore. Things that mattered to me a lot when I was younger. And now I see them in a greater context and they just don't matter as much. Or maybe it's something like someone comes to me and has a pastoral concern they want to talk about. Maybe it's a problem in their marriage or a relational problem with a friend. And they start into the story, and pretty close to the beginning of the story, I can guess how the story is going to end. Not because I'm smarter, but because I've had a lot of these meetings and I hear a lot of the same things over and over again. That doesn't diminish the importance of any individual story. It just means that some of us are holding on to a vantage point that the young might not have, because, as my husband likes to say, most of us live life like we're the first human. We're like so surprised when something that's so common happens. Like think about when someone has their first child and they're like, wow, this is really hard. It's like, I feel like there was a book you could have read that would have told you that, And so, and I think, here we are in our late 50s. Well, how much more will I feel this way should the Lord grant me 75 years of life or 80 years of life if I feel this way now already? And yet in our culture, we think that the older you are, the less you can relate to what's happening in the world right now, because we live in an age where technology moves so fast. So many things have changed, even in just my lifetime, the lifetimes of my children, that valuing the elderly requires understanding a different form of wisdom than the internet can give, than ChatGPT can give. It's a form of wisdom that is distinctly human, that is a gift from God, and that just takes you. It's like a fine wine. It takes years to develop.
All right, let's take some calls. Let's go to Dina in California. Dina, you're live on the air. Go ahead with your question or your comment.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. Well, I just want to say that I love to tell my age in public loudly. And then I
praise God.
Yes, that it's all by Jesus Christ that I'm here still standing, and I'm one more day closer to seeing my risen Savior. Yes, I'm just so against all that I don't know what you can call it, propaganda, the commercials, the anti-aging cream, the dyeing your hair, all of that. I'm so against it. I believe if you're a true woman of God, what's in your heart shows on your face, and you have a beauty that the world sees, but they cannot duplicate it if they don't know Christ Jesus, our Lord and Savior.
I think there's something to that. I think there's something. If you hold on, Dina, hold on one second, Dina. We want to give you a copy of the book as well. So if you'll hold on, we're going to give you a copy of Dust to Dust: Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. Go ahead, Jim. We got about a minute left.
Sounds like Dina could have written the book. That was beautifully said, and we'll talk about the should I or should I not of cosmetic surgeries. But really, again, we're going to need to talk about a theology of the body before we can even consider that.
Yeah, and I think that's the part that a lot of people don't think through. It's just simply, okay, well, this is what everyone's doing. And so again, she mentioned dyeing your hair. I'm not against that. I don't, just to be crystal clear. It wouldn't take 2 seconds to see me, though in the last 5 years, my hair has gone completely gray. But I know that among women, that's a much more common thing as well. Maybe you can even address that when we come back. But let's make sure we give out the phone number. Our phone number is 877-548-3675. We are back, and we're back on our fancy, good technology. As I mentioned earlier, it's not the amazing crew in downtown Chicago. Merle's our engineer. He does an amazing job, but it's something wrong with my computer, so I had to switch programs and all that sort of stuff. But again, it always happens when you're live, but thank you for your patience. And now we should be working. I'm on the regular microphone and all that. And we got your calls coming out already. This is super. We're going to go to calls in just a second. I got one more question I'll ask Jim before we do. But let me remind you that we're talking about aging. The book is Dust to Dust: Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. It's available wherever good books are sold. Jen Wilkin is our guest, our return guest. We've had her on the program before, I think maybe twice. Might have been on the podcast. I don't remember. Our phone number is 877-548-3675. Let me say it again. They tell me to say it slowly. 877-548-3675. Okay. Jen, one question before we start going to the calls. If aging is a consequence of the fall, shouldn't we do everything we can to fight it? And we talked some about being healthy. I mean, I think we probably want to do that. Last 6 years, I've lost over 100 pounds. So if we're looking at health as a consequence of the fall, or even, someone mentioned dyeing their hair. So what is the appropriate thing to do if aging is a consequence of the fall?
Well, I do think that modern medicine is a gift and we should avail ourselves of it. But I think that what we can't miss is that a lot of what is being offered to us doesn't have a lot to do with our health. Not only that, but when we think about ways to make ourselves healthy, there is usually some component of vanity attached to it that we have to wrestle down. So 2 people can step onto a treadmill for 2 very different reasons, is the way that I will sometimes say this. And when we think about this in light of what our bodies are for, when we ask the theological question about bodies, what the culture has said to us over and over again in a way that has formed us, we have to admit that cultural liturgies or repetitions have a formational effect on us. When we think about being healthy, we have a hard time separating out looking good from feeling good and keeping each of those in the right place. But the culture is telling us over and over again that the primary function of a body is to be decorative. Specifically for women, we hear this. You're supposed to look good. And what the Bible would say is the primary purpose of a body is to be useful, to be of service to God and others. It doesn't mean, God bless some of you. You're very decorative. God bless you. I've laughed that aging has been much easier for those of us who have had sort of average looking faces and bodies our whole lives. It's a form of, I think they call it your pretty privilege. When you're a beautiful person, people pay attention to you and we love that. And so when you sort of start to enter the invisible years of mid to late life, that's a shock. And a lot of people, under the guise of good health, try to maintain their decorative value past the point that is humanly possible. Charm is deceitful and beauty is fleeting. But we're no, I think I can keep it from being fleeting. I think I can actually do something to turn that the other way. And I think we have to ask the question: how are we all being formed as a culture when aging is seen as something to conceal or deny? Not just death, which has been, a more typical thing that generations before us have dealt with, but for us, it's not just that death is supposed to happen off screen where we don't see it. It's that aging is basically the equivalent of a deformity in physical terms. The medical aesthetics industry began as a compassion ministry for soldiers returning from World War I, to help with disfigurement. And so it's no wonder that so much of what we hear from the cosmetic industry is some version of, when you get older, you are facing disfigurement.
Oh, for sure. Fascinating. And you mentioned the invisible years. It's a phrase. I read about this years ago. And again, this is an article I read many, many years ago. The difference between men and women, again, I've been an average looking person for a very, very long time. So, but like, it doesn't hit, I think, as hard for men. I think it does still, but clearly the article I read was the invisible years. I've only heard that applied to women, where like, okay, there's your 20s, and then so how do you kind of address men and women and cultural responses to aging in there? Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I see happen with men. So men, a full-grown adult male is the closest that a human gets to having physical autonomy, right? Like, he can go where he wants, he can do what he wants, and it explains so much of the sociological patterns we see in society. Women are vulnerable physically even into adulthood. So in other words, I can be overwhelmed. I walk down a dark alley differently than a full-grown male does, because I understand my ability to be overwhelmed. And in particular, we have periods in our biology, women do, that are programmed for us to be more vulnerable. So like a 9-month pregnant woman is even more defenseless in that situation than a full-grown woman who's not pregnant. Okay, so women intuitively understand vulnerability throughout life in a way that goes away for men for a period in their prime, so to speak, their physical prime. And I think that the difficulty for men is returning to dependence. Realizing that they've lost. If women have pretty power, I guess men or pretty privilege. Men have a physical privilege that they lose as they age. Right. And so, like in our household, it looks like this. I tell Jeff, you are only allowed on ladders of a certain height, these days, because I need him to keep what he's got.
I got that rule as well.
Yeah. And I'm like, why do we still own the ladders you're not allowed on? And then he's got my 25-year-old son as his accomplice anytime he's out there trying to get up on one. And so I think for men, it's very hard to return to a state of physical dependence, probably harder than it is for women who have understood physical dependence as a feature, not a bug of being human.
That's fascinating. And I hadn't thought about that. I will tell you, though, and again, I don't want to make this all about me, but the last months, about a month ago, I had this surgery. And about a week before that, I was pretty much needed help to do anything. And then, 2 weeks ago, I was unable to move, mostly, functionally just bedridden. And I feel like every time I go out for a walk, I need someone to take me out for a walk. I was wearing the gait belt for a while. And a lot of that is, okay, this is not great. But again, because I'm at the cusp of 60, and I'm thinking this is probably life in 20 years in general. So it's been, again, the timing of your book for me, not that you didn't write it for me, but it's like, okay, all the things I'm experiencing now are what, again, even my going for walks and, nodding at other guys got in other guys that are in a walker. It does point to where things are headed as well. So I do wonder, like, how do you think, for me, I'm like, okay, I see all these older people who are similar shape as me, but you really make a point that the elderly folks are indispensable in the body of Christ. So how, and again, I've been even thinking about like access, I never, I didn't think about here's handicap access, but all the older people are in a walker, like they need that. So that's one way, but what are some ways the church can better serve senior members and elderly in the community? And then let me just say, as soon as you answer that, we're going to go right to the call. So let me remind people, the phone number here is 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. What do you think about the church and the elderly?
Well, I'm in the same space you are, which means I've been testing all the ADA compliance at my own church building, and it has been weighed in the balance and found wanting. I will say that. I think any early injury that we deal with or setback that we deal with is a dress rehearsal for aging. Excuse me. And so the degree to which you're patient with it is probably a good litmus test for how patient you will be when aging is upon you. I think that I'll give one example of how churches are probably not paying as much attention as they could to the needs of the elderly. The most common format in a lot of the churches that you and I spend time in is roughly the equivalent of a TED Talk at a Coldplay concert. That's the joke, right? It's the loud sort of concert-y praise and worship. And the standard setting, decibel setting for the soundboards in most churches of that kind is 90, 91. That's considered a safe level for adult ears. But for the ears of children and senior adults, like if you've ever seen a child in your service wearing headphones, that's because the safe level for children and senior adults is actually 70 to 71 decibels. So we're telling the elderly, whatever hearing you have left, we're going to take it from you during a worship service. Now, my joke has been, if I'm going to lose my hearing, it's going to be at a decent concert. And so, but do we even think, are the young asking the elderly to bow to their preferences instead of the young honoring the elderly by submitting to their needs? And you could argue there are lots of ways that this plays out. But again, the elderly are not present in our churches just so that we can serve them. They actually have a downward reciprocal blessing that they bestow on those who are younger because of the years of experience and wisdom that the Lord has given to them after having lived a long life. And I don't think we see that wisdom as relevant, and I don't think we see it as indispensable. I think we see it as like, it's nice if I want to go find an older person when I have a crisis, instead of thinking I should be in relationship with older people. And in a culture where people were not as mobile, you would have been by default in relationship with older people who you were related to. But because we have such mobility in our culture, many of us are not living near our grandparents and great-grandparents in their years of extremity. So you need a surrogate grandparent if you're not that close to your own. That would be my pitch.
It's a good pitch. All right, phone number 877-548-3675. We're going to go right to the calls. Kind of a lightning round, I guess, at this point. But 877-548-3675. Cheryl, we're going to go to you first, and we're going to go to Elena. Then we're going to keep walking through the list as well. Last time on the phone number, 877-548-3675. Jen Wilkins, our guest. The book is Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. We're back in a few seconds with your phone call. All right, we're back at Stetzer Live. I said we're going to go right to the calls, and we are 877-548-3675. We're going to go first to Cheryl in Holland, Michigan, one of the most beautiful little cities in the world. Cheryl, you're live on the air. Jump right in with your question or your comment.
What is the word from the Lord on aging?
Okay. All right. That's right to it. You'll hold on a second. We're going to give you a copy of Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. What's the Lord say to us about aging, Jen?
He says that gray hair is a crown of glory. And he says that wisdom is found among the aged. And he says that the young can acquire that wisdom by proximity to the aged and by paying attention to the passage of time themselves. So that's a short version of it, but obviously there's much more.
Oh, that's great. No, that's great. I love that. But you laid it out quite clearly, too. And by the way, Cheryl, super, getting right to the point. We're kind of in our lightning round. Everyone, let's jump right to that point, and then we'll hear from Jen as well. We're going to go to I'm hoping I'm pronouncing it correctly. It's Elena in Willing, somewhere in Willing. So, Elena, you're live on the air. Jump right in.
I was wondering
wondering what, Jen, what you thought about the way children are elevated today, their opinions at the same level as older people and adults, as if their opinion mattered as much and that they were as wise. And I think it's old people are taken aback, and we feel like we can't say anything because if we say something, there's objections. Oh, you have to listen to the young, you have to. And I think that's a disservice to them and a disservice to us. And they would grow up thinking that their opinions are the most important. They always have to be listened to without wisdom. What do you think?
Okay, let's jump in on that. Elena, first of all, thank you so much for your call. We're going to give you a copy of Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an
We want to listen to young people, but I think she's right. There's almost like, if you're young, you must be right. How do you balance that out?
Well, it's not that there's nothing that we can learn from the young, but we learn things from the young from the vantage point of being older than they are, not because they are fountainheads of wisdom. And when we communicate to a child that they're a fountainhead of wisdom, then we're laying a burden on them that is actually crushing. In the near term, it may seem like it's paying them a compliment, but children cannot carry the weight of that expectation because there is a form. It doesn't mean they have nothing wise or nothing in a statement they might say might convey wisdom. It means that there's a quality of wisdom that can only be achieved with time passing. And I do think we are in a particularly child-centric iteration of parenting. And I think it can't last. I think the pendulum's going to have to swing back. We're going to begin to see the fallout from it.
100%. Let's go to Penny in Alabama. Penny, you're live on the air. Jump right in.
Some encouragement for the aging. 1 Samuel 16:7 says, "The man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart."
Amen. I love the King James Version there to Penny. Well done as well. Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World is coming your direction. Jen, you take quite a tour de force, kind of look at Scripture as well. What are some other passages beyond those that Penny just mentioned and others that might be helpful to us?
Well, actually, I love the one Penny stated because it gets to the heart of a lot of what I'm talking about in the book, which is this: bodies decline, but people develop. Our interior lives grow deeper and richer when we are in the Lord. And so when someone just looks at the body, it is deceptive from the standpoint of, you think, well, that's a worn out vessel. What could possibly be of worth that's inside of it? And the scriptures remind us again and again that there's something of great worth in that nondescript vessel.
That's so countercultural. And again, I'm of the view that countercultural is good. And right now, one of the ways that people immediately come to about countercultural is on, say, sexual ethics. Great. But what about aging ethics? What about how we think differently about that's super countercultural. And I got to tell you, like in Southern California, that maybe as countercultural as some of these other issues as well, just to say, no, we don't think like the world thinks on these topic. So I love that. Let's go to Raj. Raj, you are from Oklahoma. You're live on the air with your question or comment.
Jen, as a 62-year-old man, your work really resonates with me, so I could relate to everything that you've written. One of the things that you had said that really resonated with me was the false story of anti-aging is fueled by fear, and that really hit me.
Love that. Good word too. Hold on, we're going to give you a copy of Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely in an Anti-Aging World. But let's zero in on that a little more. It is fear, and I think it's probably multifaceted. It's fear of death. Again, as Christians, we still hate death, but we don't fear it in the same way that the world does. We don't mourn in the same way the world does. So there's fear of death, but there's also just fear of getting old. Yes. And I would say, I have concern about getting old. So what's the right, where does fear, we're told not to fear, but where is also we want to work hard. I've been more focused on my health the last 5 years because I'm getting older. So talk to me about that.
Well, any good messaging, any sticky messaging is usually fueled by fear. And you can see that all over our culture right now. That's what you get out on social media, and what do you see? You can tell exactly what everyone is afraid of. But I think when it comes to the message of anti-aging, we don't dig any deeper. We just know that we feel afraid, but it's sort of this nebulous fear. And we tend to say, oh, I'm afraid of dying. But the reality is that so much of life around us is trying to numb our sense of the passage of time. that we're not all contemplating death. And so we think about aging as a loss of identity, as a loss of power, as a loss of influence. And it may be that can be true. This is why Christian communities are so important, because within the church, we can't control how the culture views aging. You can tell by the medically assisted death statistics in Canada, our northern neighbor, that the belief that the elderly are obsolescent is skyrocketing. And it's got to be in our culture as well, which means if we have a whole life pro-life ethic from cradle to grave, then or from womb to tomb, then we're going to have to pay attention to this as the church. And the church can be a beacon of showing the world what it means to value the elderly until their final breath.
Love that. And I think that's, again, that whole life ethic really does matter. I guess we're kind of running out of time for more calls, but I want to get one more question from you. How is aging a gift? Like, how are we, because you talk about celebrating part of it in the book as well. Talk to me about that. And we've got about a little over a minute.
So I don't want to act like I don't know that aging is also a trial. It is a trial. It's for those of us who have not encountered trials earlier in life, it will be the ultimate test of our endurance if we are given the gift of a long life. But it is also a gift because we recognize the great purpose of being older and what we can communicate in terms, I call it generational wealth in the book, that there is a generational wealth that one generation would tell the next of the wonderful works of the Lord, to borrow from the scriptures. And so we want to be sober-minded about how our life and our words are speaking of the goodness of God. Even as we are returning bodily strength or returning bodily ability, we recognize that we are growing richer internally if we're submitting ourselves to the work of the Holy Spirit. And that's a real challenge to do. We all know old people who have gotten meaner, and we know old people who have gotten gentler. So we ask the Lord, make me the gentle one. Help me to number my days so that every day I'm growing more toward that. And when we do that, we're a rich gift, not just to the church, but to the world around us.
Jen, I'm so thankful for you writing this. Of course, I'm a big fan of your writing, and I just encourage you to go to edstetzerlive.com. You can see a link to all Jen's books there as well. But this one, Dust to Dust, Aging Wisely, an Anti-Aging World, I commend to you. Thanks to our team here that's been working hard behind the scenes, Karen Hendren, producer, Merle St. James, engineer, associate producer, Lisa Jempty. Simon's been on the phone. Thank to everybody for listening. We appreciate you. God bless.